My name is Claire Donovan, and last month I watched my big sister marry the kind of man my mother always wished I would bring home. I thought the hardest part would be seeing their perfect life framed in white flowers and fake smiles. I was wrong. The real sting came when I found my seat hidden behind a pillar, like they hoped I would disappear. Then a stranger sat beside me and whispered, "Just follow my lead." That moment changed everything, but it did not start there, in that ballroom full of champagne and carefully arranged centerpieces. It started weeks earlier, on a Tuesday afternoon in my tiny Seattle apartment, when a thick, cream-colored envelope slipped through the mail slot and landed on the floor with a soft, heavy sound that somehow felt louder than it should have. I almost stepped on it coming in from work. My legs ached from standing in the bakery kitchen since 4 in the morning, and my hands still smelled like butter and sugar. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys into the chipped ceramic bowl by the door, and scooped up the day's mail: bills, coupons, a flyer for a gym I would never join. And then that envelope. My full name was written in looping, elegant handwriting across the front: Miss Claire Donovan. No return address, just the faint impression of money in the thickness of the paper and the way the gold foil glinted at the edges. I knew what it was before I opened it. My stomach tightened as I slid a finger under the flap. Inside was a perfectly designed wedding invitation, all florals and script fonts. Sarah Lynn Donovan to be married to Jonathan Reed. The date, the time, the location. A coastal resort, 3 hours away. The kind of place my mother liked to mention casually in conversations so people would know she could afford it. I sat down at my tiny kitchen table, the one that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong, and read the words 3 times. My chest felt tight and empty at the same time. My older sister was getting married. My mother was probably already practicing the story in her head. My oldest married a surgeon. My youngest makes cupcakes. There was a smaller card tucked inside, handwritten by Sarah. "Claire, I know we have not been as close these past few years, but it would mean a lot if you came. You are my sister. Love, Sarah." No heart. No little smiley face like when we were teenagers, just neat, controlled letters, and a line that sounded more like a formality than a feeling. "You are my sister," as if she needed to remind me, or herself. I set the card down and stared at the invitation. My reflection wavered in the shiny gold border. 28, hair pulled back in a messy knot still dusted with flour, wearing the same worn t-shirt I threw on every afternoon when I dragged myself home from the bakery. Not exactly the picture of success my mother liked to parade in front of her friends. For a moment, I imagined saying no. I pictured myself dropping the invitation straight into the trash, spending that weekend sleeping in, maybe finally having time to create a new pastry for the shop. I could avoid the side comments, the comparisons, the feeling of being an extra in a movie starring Sarah. But that is the thing about family. No matter how many times they cut you, there is still a part of you that bleeds toward them. I picked up my phone and scrolled to Sarah's name. We had not talked in weeks. The last text she sent me was a photo of her new car, followed by a message from our mother that said, "See what happens when you make smart choices." It rang 4 times before she answered. "Hey, Claire." Her voice was bright, rushed, like mine was just one more appointment she had to get through. "I got your invitation," I said. "Congratulations." "Oh, good. I was worried it might get lost in the mail. So, can you come?" I hesitated. I should have said I would think about it. I should have asked why she was inviting me now, after ignoring me for so long. Instead, the little sister part of me answered first. "Yeah. I will be there." "Great. That means a lot. Things are crazy right now with work, and the wedding planner and Mom. You know how she gets. We will talk more soon." "Okay." Before I could ask anything, she was saying "gotta run," and the line went dead. I sat there, phone still pressed to my ear long after the call ended. The apartment hummed around me, the fridge rattled. The upstairs neighbor's TV murmured through the ceiling. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance. My world was small and loud and real. In my head, I could already hear my mother's voice. "Sarah is getting married at the Seaview Resort. Have you seen their Instagram? It is stunning. The chef there is incredible. Of course, Claire bakes too, but you know, this is different. This is high-end." I wished I could laugh it off. I wished I could say I did not care. But that line on the little card would not leave me alone. "You are my sister." If that were true, why did I feel like a distant relative they had to invite to avoid gossip? I propped the invitation against the salt shaker, where it caught the light every time I moved. For the next few days, it sat there like a dare. At the bakery, between frosting cakes and filling tart shells, my mind kept drifting back to it. I imagined walking into a room full of people dressed in clothes more expensive than my rent. I imagined my mother's tight smile, the way she would push a glass of champagne into my hand and introduce me as, "This is Claire, she does pastries." Not a pastry chef, just pastries, like I was a hobby, not a person. The more I thought about it, the more a quiet anger began to simmer underneath the nerves. I had worked hard for my life. I had burned my hands, ruined my back, and poured everything into a craft I loved. My paychecks might not impress my mother, but my regulars at the bakery did. The little kids who pressed their faces to the glass case when they saw the chocolate croissants did. The elderly man who came in every Friday for a lemon tart because it reminded him of his late wife did. My work mattered, just not to the people who were supposed to know me best. One night, after closing up the shop, my boss, Maria, wiped her hands on a towel and nodded at the invitation that had somehow ended up tucked into my recipe notebook. The wedding you told me about?" she asked. "Yeah. My sister's," I said. "Fancy place, fancy people. You going?" I sighed. I already told her I would. Maria studied me for a moment. Her dark eyes were kind but sharp. "Then go," she said. "But go as the woman you are now, not the kid they remember. And remember this, mi niña, people can only make you feel small if you agree with them." I smiled, but her words lodged somewhere deep. That night, I pulled my one nice dress out of the back of the closet. It was a simple navy wrap dress I had bought on sale 2 years earlier and worn exactly once. I held it up in front of the mirror and tried to picture myself standing next to Sarah in whatever designer gown she had chosen. The comparison hurt. It always did. Still, I said yes. I RSVP'd online like any other guest. No special note, no extra message, just one more name on a long list of people who would show up to witness Sarah's perfect day. I did not know it yet, sitting alone in my little apartment with flowers still under my fingernails, but accepting that invitation was not just me agreeing to attend my sister's wedding, it was me walking straight into the last chapter of the story, where I let my family decide my worth. I thought I was just going to a ceremony. I had no idea I was heading toward the moment I would learn what it feels like to be deliberately erased in a room full of people, and what happens when one stranger refuses to let you disappear. If I am honest, the wedding was not really the beginning. It was just the moment everything my family had been teaching me my whole life about my place finally became impossible to ignore. Because in my house, this was always the rule. Sarah was the story. I was the footnote. Growing up, it felt normal at first. Older siblings go first, right? They get the new things, the attention, the first congratulations. That is what everyone says. But somewhere along the line, with us, it stopped being about birth order and started being about worth. Sarah was 3 years older than me, and perfect in all the ways my mother cared about. She walked early, talked early, read early. By the time she was in 5th grade, she was on some gifted and talented list that my mom, Linda, brought up to anyone who would listen. At the grocery store, at church, at the dentist. "This is Sarah, my oldest. She is in the gifted program. And this is Claire. She loves to draw." I did not think much of it when I was little. I really did love to draw. I loved to bake muffins from the boxed mix and smear frosting on cookies until they looked like they had been decorated by a raccoon. I was the messy one, the creative one, the one who never sat quite right in the space my mother had reserved for me. The first time I really felt the difference was in middle school. Sarah was in high school then, getting ready for her big debate competition. Mom had cleared the entire dining room table for her practice, papers spread everywhere, highlighters in neat rows, Sarah pacing back and forth as she practiced her opening statement. The same night, I had a small art show at school. Nothing big, just an exhibit of student work in the hallway outside the gym. One of my pieces had been chosen for the front display, a charcoal drawing of our old house. My art teacher had pulled me aside and said, "You have a real eye, Claire. Your perspective is strong." I remember standing in the kitchen, clutching the permission slip, while Mom stirred sauce on the stove. They are having an art night at school, I told her. They picked one of my drawings, we can go see it. She did not even look up. Oh, honey, that sounds nice, but we cannot tonight. Your sister needs quiet to practice. The debate is important. I went alone. I pretended I did not care that other kids had parents taking pictures next to their paintings. I stood in front of my drawing for a few seconds, then ducked into the bathroom until the awkward knot in my throat went away. That pattern never really changed. Every milestone, every holiday, every casual Tuesday dinner seemed to bend toward whatever Sarah needed. When she started AP classes, the whole house revolved around study schedules and test dates. When I got my first job at a small bakery downtown, Mom barely looked up from the laptop where she was helping Sarah search for colleges. "A bakery, that is good for now," she said. "Everyone has to start somewhere. Maybe later you can go back and get a real degree." The hook was always the same. I was good, but never enough. Sarah was the main event. I was the opening act people forgot by the time the lights went down. The fight about my future started the summer before my senior year of high school. Sarah had just finished her first year at a private university on an academic scholarship. She came home with stories about pre-med classes and internships. Mom walked around the house a little taller that summer, like she was the one earning the grades. One night at dinner, I finally said it out loud. "I do not want to go to a regular college," I said, pushing peas around my plate. "I want to go to culinary school. There is this program in Portland. It has a pastry track." Mom's fork froze halfway to her mouth. "Culinary school," she said the words like they tasted bad. "Claire, that is not a real plan. That is a hobby. Chefs make real money," I said. "Bakers too. You told me to find something I am good at. I am good at this." Dad cleared his throat. He had always been quieter in these battles. "Maybe we should at least look at the program," he offered. "See what the options are." Mom shot him a look that shut him down instantly. "Sarah is going to be a doctor," she said, turning back to me. "Do you know how hard she has worked? Do you know what that degree will mean for her life? You are smart enough to do something like that too. Why would you throw it away standing in a kitchen all day?" "Because when I am in a kitchen, I do not feel like a mistake," I wanted to say. Instead, I sat there, face burning, while Sarah chewed slowly and watched the scene like a familiar rerun she did not need to comment on. Later that night, she knocked on my bedroom door. "You really want to do that?" she asked, leaning against the frame. "Baking." I was sitting cross-legged on my bed, flipping through a cookbook I had checked out from the library. "Yeah," I said without looking up. "I do." She sighed. In that way she had that made it sound like she was tired of carrying all the responsibility in the world. "Mom is not going to take that well," she said. "You know that." She already did not. Sarah walked over to my desk, picking up a small sketch I had left there, a pencil drawing of stacked croissants. "You are really good," she admitted. "But this family does not understand that kind of good." "I know." She put the drawing down and left without saying anything else. That was the other thing about Sarah. She was not cruel in obvious ways. She did not scream or insult me directly. She just lived so fully in the lane my mother paved for her that there was never any room for me to step into the light. In the end, I went to culinary school anyway. I worked part-time, took out loans, and moved into a tiny apartment with a roommate who snored and left dishes in the sink. Mom came to visit campus once. She spent the whole time talking about Sarah's organic chemistry class and barely glanced at the patisserie lab where I had been learning to temper chocolate. Years later, when I got the job at the Seattle bakery, I texted Mom a picture of the first display case I was in charge of. Rows of tarts, glossy fruit glazes catching the light. "Looks nice," she replied. "Have you thought about going back to school?" So when that wedding invitation landed in my hands, it was not just about one day in June. It was about every time I had been passed over, talked around, treated like an optional subtitle under the main headline of Sarah's life. That is what made the little handwritten note so hard to swallow. "You are my sister." If that were true in the way she meant it, would I have to drive 3 hours to sit in a room full of people and wonder if anyone actually saw me? The funny thing is, I kept telling myself I was prepared. I knew how our family worked. I knew the script. Mother fussing over details, Sarah shining at the center, me, somewhere on the edges, holding a plate or a camera, clapping at the right moments. What I did not realize, not yet, was that this wedding was not just another scene where I stood in the background. It was the night they pushed me so far to the margins that there was only one place left to go, not out of the picture, but off to the side, where someone else was waiting who did not know the script, did not care about the roles my family had written for me, and had the power to flip our whole story upside down. At the time, all I knew was this: my sister was getting the kind of wedding my mother dreamed about, and I was about to spend a weekend watching it happen. I thought I was just going to survive another round of comparisons. I had no idea that years of being the supporting character were about to collide with one man who refused to let me stay in the background, and that collision would hurt more than I expected and heal more than I thought possible. The weekend of the wedding came faster than I expected, the way dentist appointments and bad news always do. One minute I was rolling out tart dough in the bakery, pretending I still had time to change my mind, and the next I was staring at my overstuffed duffel bag wondering how you dress to watch your sister live out your mother's favorite fantasy. I left Seattle early on Saturday, before the sun had fully burned through the morning clouds. The highway was mostly empty, just a ribbon of gray leading me toward the coast. I drove with the windows cracked and the radio low, my mind replaying old scenes like a highlight reel no one had asked to see. Sarah's graduation, where Mom cried when her name was called and barely clapped when mine was announced an hour later. The night I got my first full-time job at the bakery, and Mom had said, "That is great, honey. Now, have you heard Sarah might get into that research program?" By the time I turned off the main road toward the resort, my chest felt tight, like my ribs were holding in more than just my lungs. The Seaview Resort rose up out of the mist like something from a lifestyle magazine. White buildings with big glass windows faced the water. Manicured lawns flowed down toward a private stretch of rocky beach. Flower beds exploded with color along every path. Everything about the place seemed designed to say, "We are expensive and very proud of it." I pulled my 10-year-old Honda into the valet line and immediately wished I could disappear. The car in front of me was a sleek black Tesla. The one behind me was some kind of shiny SUV that probably cost more than my entire culinary education. A young guy in a pressed uniform opened my door with a professional smile. "Checking in for the Donovan Reed wedding?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah. I am Claire, the bride's sister." His smile brightened, like that detail mattered in this world. "Welcome, Miss Donovan. The wedding party is in the Ocean View suite on the 3rd floor. Check-in for guests is at the main desk." Wedding party. The words landed heavier than they should have. No one had used them with me. I took my small overnight bag and the garment bag with my navy dress and walked into the lobby. Inside, everything smelled like citrus and money. A crystal chandelier hung from the high ceiling. Couples in pressed linen and neutral tones lingered near the windows, with drinks that cost more than my usual grocery run. I felt suddenly aware of the flower stains on my sneakers and the cheap suitcase that snagged every time I pulled the zipper. At the front desk, the woman in the neat blazer found my name quickly. "You are in a Standard King on the 2nd floor," she said. "Congratulations to your sister." "Thank you," I answered automatically, even though the congratulations were not for me, and never had been. The logical thing would have been to go to my room, unpack, maybe take a shower, and shake off the drive. Instead, I found myself riding the elevator to the 3rd floor, following the signs to the Ocean View suite. The door was propped open with a gold stiletto heel. Laughter spilled into the hallway before I even stepped inside. The suite looked like someone had taken a bridal Pinterest board and stretched it into 3 dimensions. Racks of dresses lined one wall, all in the same soft blush color. Makeup and curling irons covered every flat surface. Half-empty champagne flutes balanced on coasters that said Bride Tribe in rose gold letters. Sarah sat in the center of it all in a white silk robe, her hair half done, her face glowing under expertly applied makeup. Bridesmaids floated around her like satellites in matching robes, their laughter sharp and bright. For a second, I just stood there in the doorway, taking it all in. My big sister, the one who used to steal my socks and blame me for things she did, now transformed into this polished, magazine-ready version of herself. She looked up when she finally noticed me. "Oh hey, Claire. You are here," she said. Her smile was polite, not exactly warm. "You are early." I stepped in, feeling suddenly too large for the room. "I thought maybe I could help with something," I said. Steadying my voice took more effort than it should have. Steaming dresses or carrying things, whatever you need. One of the bridesmaids, a girl with perfect curls and perfect teeth, glanced at me over her champagne flute. I think the planner has everything covered, she said. Right, Sarah. Sarah nodded, eyes already drifting back to the mirror. Yeah, we are pretty set, she said. The planner and the stylist are handling it. You should relax. Go check out the grounds or something. The ceremony is going to be beautiful. She sounded like a hostess in a hotel commercial, not a sister who had not seen me in months. I tried again. So, who is in the bridal party? I asked, hating how small my voice sounded in my own ears. Sarah gestured vaguely at the women around her. College friends, work friends, Emily, Jess, and Katie. And my maid of honor, obviously. She smiled at the woman fixing her hair, a tall brunette who looked like she had been born wearing heels. I waited for my name, waited for the slip, the oh my god, I thought I told you, the mom messed up the email, it never came. So, I am just a guest, I said, trying to make it sound like a joke, like it did not matter as much as it did. Sarah blinked, like the thought had not occurred to her that I might have expected anything else. The party was already full, she said. You live so far away now, and these are the girls I see all the time. I figured you would understand. Besides, this way you can just enjoy the day. No stress, no stress. Right, one of the bridesmaids whispered something to another, and they both laughed quietly. I told myself it was not about me. It was probably about lipstick or flowers, or some memory I was not part of. Still, the room suddenly felt too warm, my sweater too tight around my shoulders. I forced a smile. Sure, that makes sense. I will just see you later, I guess. Congratulations again. Sarah turned back to the mirror as the stylist adjusted her veil. By the time I stepped back into the hallway, I was not sure she had heard me. I walked aimlessly down the corridor until I found a small window overlooking the ocean. The sky was starting to clear, patches of blue pushing through the clouds. Somewhere below, staff hurried across the lawn with chairs and flower arrangements, building the perfect backdrop for photos that would get hundreds of likes. I pressed my forehead against the cool glass and let the disappointment wash over me. It was not that I had dreamed of being a bridesmaid. I did not care about matching robes or posed pictures with bouquets. It was what it symbolized. Bridesmaids are the people closest to you, the ones you want in your line of sight when you say, I do. My sister had filled those spots with people she met in lecture halls and office break rooms. There was a time I would have done anything to stand next to her. Now I was just another body in a chair. I tried to shake it off as I headed back to the elevator. In the lobby, guests were starting to arrive in clusters. Aunts and uncles I had not seen in years. Old neighbors, people from Sarah's work. They greeted each other with the excited warmth that comes from being invited into someone's shiny new chapter. No one seemed to notice me slipping around the edges. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the lack of a bridesmaid dress or hotel suite full of laughter. It was the way I could stand in the middle of a place supposedly full of my people and feel like I had wandered into a stranger's event. Later, when I took my dress out of the garment bag and laid it on the bed in my small, standard room, I looked at the navy fabric and felt a strange clarity settle over me. This was not my day. It had never been my story. I could either spend the next 10 hours chasing a place in it, or I could watch carefully and finally see the truth I had been dodging for years. At the time, I thought the worst part would be walking into the ceremony alone, taking my seat quietly somewhere in the middle rows, and clapping on cue. I did not know yet that my family had one last message to send me before the vows were spoken. Not in words, not in a fight, just in the place they chose to put me. I found out what they really thought of me an hour before the ceremony, standing alone in a sea of white chairs. The lawn behind the resort had been transformed into something out of a bridal magazine. Rows of chairs faced an arch wrapped in flowers and soft fabric that fluttered in the breeze. A string quartet tuned quietly in the corner. Someone had scattered white rose petals along the aisle like it was a runway for a perfect life. Each chair had a small white card, tied to it with a pale blue ribbon. Names, written in that same elegant script from the invitation, marked where everyone belonged. I told myself I was being dramatic. Maybe I would be somewhere in the middle. Not front row material, obviously, but close enough that I could at least see my own sister say her vows. Close enough that if she glanced out at the guests, she might actually spot me. I started at the front, because that was where hope still lived then. The first row was exactly what you would expect. My mother, Linda, printed in strong, confident letters, right next to my father. Even after the divorce, they could sit side by side for their oldest daughter's big moment. Sarah's future in-laws took up the rest of that row. Their names were written with extra flourishes. The second row held grandparents and godparents. The third row was for aunts and uncles. Every seat was full of people whose lives my mother considered important. People who would be in the photos that got framed and posted and talked about. I moved down the aisle, scanning card after card. Cousins, old friends of my parents. Names I barely recognized but had apparently earned better spots than the bride's only sister. It was like reading a list of priorities. By the fifth row, my heart had dropped into a steady, dull ache. I checked the left side, then the right, telling myself maybe this was a mistake. Maybe there was a special section I had missed. Maybe I was on some reserved seating near the aisle that just had not been set up yet. But every time I turned, more people were pouring onto the lawn. Laughter drifted around me as guests greeted each other, hugging and catching up like this was a high school reunion with better catering. No one asked if I needed help. I walked farther back, past the middle section, past the older relatives and the college friends and the co-workers. My fingers tightened around my clutch bag until the little metal clasp dug into my palm. Then I saw it. My name, Claire Donovan, written in perfect script on a small white card. It was tied to a chair in the very last row. Not just the last row, the far corner, directly behind one of the giant decorative pillars that flanked the back of the seating area. A thick column wrapped in flowers and fabric, beautiful from the front and entirely obstructive from behind. From that chair, I would not be able to see the arch. I would not be able to see Sarah's face. I would get a clear view of the back of people's heads and a whole lot of white pillar. For a second, I just stood there staring at it, my own name blurring at the edges. There are accidents, mistakes, oversights. I know that. But this did not feel like any of those. Someone had looked at a chart of every person attending this wedding. They had placed my mother at the front, my cousins near the aisle, Sarah's friends in perfect clusters. Then they had taken my name and deliberately slid it to the back, behind a pillar, where I could technically say I was there but no one would really have to see me. It was the most honest thing my family had ever said to me, and they did not use a single word. My first instinct was to laugh. It bubbled up from somewhere sharp and bitter. Of course, I thought. Of course this is where they put me. My second instinct was to run. I pictured myself walking back up the aisle, cutting through the clusters of guests, getting into my car, and driving away. No note, no explanation, just an empty seat where I was supposed to sit and pretend this did not hurt. If you were me in that moment, honestly, what would you have done? Stay in that chair behind the pillar, or walk away? I still ask myself that sometimes. Back then, all I knew was that my feet refused to move. I picked up the card with my name on it. The paper was thick and smooth, the kind that costs extra, just so people can feel how expensive it is. My name looked beautiful, elegant, important. It was almost funny how much care had gone into writing it, and how little care had gone into where it ended up. I sank into the chair and tested the view. If I leaned far to the right, I could see a sliver of the arch. If I leaned to the left, I saw the back of a chair in the row ahead and a slice of someone's shoulder. Straight ahead was a solid wall of pillar. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. I had cried over this family enough. I would not give them the satisfaction of one more tear, even if they would never know about it. Around me, people filled the other seats, leaving the chair next to mine empty for as long as possible. Like even strangers understood this was not prime real estate. I overheard snippets of conversation. Sarah looks stunning. The Reed family really went all out. Front row. Can you believe it? We are right behind the parents. I thought about moving my card, just picking it up and sliding it onto an empty chair in the middle rows. What would they do? Stop the ceremony, ask me to return to my assigned place like a misbehaving child. But the idea exhausted me. I knew how it would be framed later. Claire caused a scene at the wedding. Claire made everything about her. So I stayed in the last row. I sat there, spine straight, hands folded in my lap, my name still tied to the chair, like a label on a storage box. The sun broke through the clouds as the quartet started to play. Guests quieted, heads turning toward the aisle. My mother appeared, escorted to her front row seat, like a queen being escorted to her throne. Her dress was champagne-colored and perfectly tailored. She smiled at everyone she passed, basking in their attention. She did not look back once. The music changed for the bridal party. Sarah's bridesmaids floated past me in a blur of blush fabric and perfect hair, their bouquets lifted just so, their faces glowing with the kind of importance my family had never granted me. I kept thinking, this is it. This is who I am to them. Not just background. Obstruction. I wrapped my fingers around the edge of the seat until my knuckles went white, and told myself to breathe. I did not know it then, sitting behind that pillar, that someone else had been banished to this forgotten corner for a different reason. Somebody who did not know the rules of my family, did not care where they thought I belonged, and had no intention of letting me disappear quietly. The chair beside me stayed empty through the prelude music and the polite murmurs, like even fate thought this corner was beneath it. I was half watching the quartet, half watching the way the wind played with the fabric on the arch, when someone slid into the seat next to mine. Not the hesitant kind of sit, either, the confident, this is where I belong kind. For a second I thought he had to be lost. He was tall, in a charcoal suit that actually fit, not just hung there. Dark hair, a little messy like he had run a hand through it on purpose. Clean jawline, the kind of man my mother would instantly approve of on sight. Definitely not the kind of man you expect to see banished to the worst seat in the house. He glanced at the pillar, then at me, and smiled like we were in on the same private joke. "Wow," he said under his breath, "that is quite of you." I followed his gaze and actually let out a short laugh. From where we sat, the officiant was completely hidden. All we could see was a slice of the groomsman, a strip of veil, and a whole lot of floral fabric wrapped around the pillar. "Stunning," I replied. "I am especially moved by the back of that guy's head in row 8. Very emotional." He grinned, and something in my chest loosened a notch. "I am Evan," he said, offering his hand like we were meeting at a normal event, not in the exile section. "Evan Clark." "Claire," I said, shaking it. My fingers were a little cold, nerves, mostly. "Claire Donovan." His eyebrows went up a fraction. "Donovan? As in?" "Yeah," I said, the word sour on my tongue. "The bride is my sister." He looked from me to the front rows, then back to the card tied to my chair, like he was double-checking to make sure he had heard that right. "They put you back here?" he asked quietly. "Apparently I am not part of the approved aesthetic," I said. "Might clash with the imported flower budget." The music shifted slightly as another wave of guests found their seats. People glanced at us as they walked by, then looked away when they did not immediately recognize either of us as important. Evan leaned back in his chair, studying the setup with a detached amusement I envied. "For what it is worth," he said, "this is not personal. I am pretty sure I am only here because of a last-minute shuffle. I am technically a +1 for someone who got sick." I frowned. "Then why did they seat you behind a structural obstacle with me?" He tilted his head, pretending to consider. "Maybe the wedding planner has something against good bone structure," he said. "Or maybe the universe likes putting the wrong people in the wrong places just to see what happens next." The breeze lifted a strand of my hair and slapped it gently against my cheek. I tucked it back, feeling suddenly exposed, like someone had finally noticed I was sitting there when I had been trying so hard to blend into the chair. "You do not have to talk to me, you know," I said. "I am fine." He gave me a look that said he heard every lie in that sentence. "Sure," he said, "and I am here because I love staring at pillars." That startled another tiny laugh out of me. It felt foreign and shaky, like using a muscle I had forgotten I had. Up front, the processional started. The bridesmaids appeared, floating down the aisle in soft blush dresses. Guests twisted in their seats, smiling and whispering. From our angle, we got half a glimpse of each girl and full view of everyone else's reactions. Evan watched for a moment, then leaned slightly closer. "You know," he said, lowering his voice, "I have been to enough corporate events to recognize something when I see it." "What is that?" I asked. "Bad seating is never random." The words hit a little too close. I swallowed, eyes fixed on the sliver of aisle I could see. "Welcome to my life," I said finally. "In this family, seating is just another way to say what you really think." He was quiet for a beat. Not the awkward kind of quiet, more like he was letting that settle before asking the next question. "Want to know what I see?" he asked. Not really, I thought. But I nodded anyway. "I see the only person here brave enough to show up anyway," he said. "And I see a room full of people who are about to regret assuming the girl behind the pillar does not matter." I snorted. "You are very confident for someone who just met me." He smiled. "I am very observant." The music swelled again, and everyone stood. Even from our terrible vantage point, I knew this part by heart. The collective intake of breath, the hush, the turning of heads. Sarah appeared on our father's arm. I couldn't see her face, but I recognized the wave of admiration that rolled through the crowd. People whispered gorgeous and perfect the way my mother always did when she talked about her. As they walked past, I caught a fleeting glimpse of the side of her dress, the edge of her veil. That was it. Years of shared childhood, thousands of small moments, reduced to a partial view blocked by decorative fabric. Something in my chest splintered. I had told myself I was ready for this. I had told myself I knew my place. But sitting behind that pillar while my sister walked toward the life my mother had always wanted for her, felt like the final confirmation I had spent my whole life trying not to hear. "You do not belong in the picture." The officiant started talking. I could hear the rhythm of his voice but not the words. People laughed in the right places, dabbed at their eyes, sighed in unison every time Sarah and Jonathan glanced at each other. Evan shifted beside me, and when I glanced over, he was not watching the couple at all. He was watching me. "You are missing all of it," he said. I forced a smile. Pretty sure that was the plan. He studied me for a second, and then something in his expression changed. A decision, like a small click behind his eyes. "All right," he said suddenly. "This is ridiculous." He reached down, plucked my place card off the chair, and slipped it into his jacket pocket. Before I could process what he was doing, he stood, straightened his suit, and held out his hand. "Come on," he said. "What are you doing?" I hissed. "Fixing bad design," he said. "Walk with me." "You cannot just move seats," I protested, even as my fingers curled around his. "There is a chart. My mother probably laminated it. Then it will be a fun mystery for her therapist," he said. "Later. For now, just follow my lead and pretend you are my date." There it was. The line that would replay in my head 100 times later. Pretend you are my date. At that point, I should have pulled my hand back. I should have stayed in the last row like a good, invisible daughter and clapped for a ceremony I barely saw. Instead, I let him pull me to my feet. If you have ever been the forgotten person at a family event, you know this feeling. That tiny, reckless part of you that whispers, "What if, just once, you did not play the part they wrote for you?" Tell me in the comments, would you have stayed behind the pillar or taken his hand? We walked quietly up the side of the seating area, hugging the far edge so we would not block anyone's view. My heart pounded in my ears louder than the string quartet. Halfway up, Evan slowed near a table of people dressed in polished business clothes, the kind of crowd that looks like they never have to check their bank balance. There were a couple of empty seats at the end, place cards turned face down, like the universe had left a blank space just for us. Evan leaned down to the woman closest to the aisle. "Sorry to bother you, Patricia," he murmured, like they were old colleagues. "There was a mix-up with my seating card. Mind if we squeeze in down here?" She turned, blinked in recognition, and her whole face lit up. "Evan," she whispered. "Of course. Sit, sit. We were wondering where they put you." She glanced at me, taking me in with one sharp, curious look. "And who is this?" Evan smiled. That easy, practiced kind of smile that made people trust him. "This is Claire," he said. "She is with me." He said it simply, like it explained everything. We slid into the empty chairs. Just like that, I went from the last row behind a pillar to a front and center table of important people whose world I did not even understand yet. Up front, my sister was still saying her vows, oblivious. She had no idea that while she was promising forever, someone had just quietly pulled me out of the corner she had put me in. And I had no idea that pretending to be a stranger's date would be the first step in a story where, for once, I was not the one hidden from view. If sitting behind the pillar had been a quiet insult, the reception was a public lesson in just how easy it was for my family to pretend I did not exist. The ceremony ended in a blur I only half saw. From our new seats closer to the front, I caught more glimpses of Sarah and Jonathan than I would have from the last row, but it still felt like I was watching someone else's movie. People clapped, the couple kissed, and just like that, my sister's perfect life had an official start date. Evan stood when everyone else did, his hand finding the small of my back as we followed the crowd toward the main building. "You okay?" he asked softly. I nodded because, saying no would have cracked something open I was not sure I could stuff back down in front of strangers. Inside, the resort staff had turned a large terrace into the cocktail hour space. High tables draped in white linen, a bar at one end, servers weaving through the crowd with trays of tiny food that looked like art you were supposed to eat in one polite bite. Evan steered us toward a quieter corner, still within Patricia's orbit. She seemed to be someone important in Jonathan's world, and people kept stopping to greet her. "So," he said, handing me a glass of champagne he had snagged from a passing tray. "On a scale of 1 to 10, how bad is this for you so far?" I took a sip. The bubbles tickled my nose. "Honestly?" I said. I was at a solid 7 when I walked into the bridal suite and found out I was not in the wedding party. The pillar seat pushed it to a 9. "What is a 10? He asked. I gave a humorless little smile. "We have not gotten to the speeches yet." He studied me for a second, like he wanted to ask more, but someone called his name. "Evan, there you are." A man in his 50s in an expensive suit approached, with Patricia beside him. He looked familiar in the way that rich men often do, polished, practiced, forgettable in a magazine spread kind of way. "We thought they lost you," Patricia said. "Gregory will be relieved you are here. This is a big night for him." Evan's hand settled lightly on my back again, grounding me. "I would not miss it," he said. "This is Claire, by the way." Patricia's gaze shifted to me, sharp but not unkind. "Nice to meet you," she said. "How do you know the couple?" Before I could answer, Evan spoke. "Claire is Sarah's sister," he said easily. "The other Miss Donovan." Patricia's eyebrows rose. "Really?" she said. "I had no idea Sarah had a sister. She never mentioned that in any of our planning calls." The words slid right under my skin like ice. I forced a smile. "We live in different cities," I said. "We do not talk about everything." Patricia nodded like that made sense, then turned back to Evan, launching into talk about a project, budgets, timelines. I let their conversation wash over me, catching pieces that meant nothing to my world. Sustainability initiatives, emissions targets, pilot programs. I stood there, the bride's sister, listening to a woman who had helped plan my sister's wedding casually admit she had not known I existed. It should not have surprised me. It still did. When they drifted away to greet someone else, Evan looked at me. "You want the truth?" I asked. "Always. It feels like I walked into a family photo where they have already edited me out," I said quietly. "The outlines are there, but they have blurred me into the background." His jaw tightened. "Then maybe it is time someone adjusted the focus," he said. We were called into the ballroom for dinner not long after. The space was stunning, I'll give them that. Floor-to-ceiling windows looking out over the water, candles on every table, flowers everywhere. A long head table sat on a small platform, where Sarah and Jonathan and their bridal party would overlook everyone like benevolent royalty. We ended up at a table in the middle, close enough to see the head table clearly, but not so close that we would be in every picture. It was filled with people from Jonathan's world, finance, tech, or some combination of both, if the conversation was any indication. A woman with a sleek bob introduced herself as being in investor relations. A man across from her worked in marketing. Patricia sat to my left, Evan to my right, both of them comfortably embedded in that world. "So, Claire," investor relations woman said, "what do you do?" I hesitated for a second, hearing my mother's voice in my head. "She works with food. I am a pastry chef," I said. "I run the morning program at a bakery in Seattle." Her face lit up. "That sounds wonderful," she said. "My husband would kill for that. He is obsessed with croissants." The man next to her chimed in with a story about a bakery in Paris. The table laughed. For once, I did not feel like my job was the embarrassing confession at a dinner party. The salad course came and went. Glasses clinked, the noise in the room built to a pleasant roar, like everyone was collectively leaning into the illusion that love and money could fix everything. Then, the DJ tapped the microphone, and the room quieted. "We are going to start the speeches now," he announced. If everyone could take their seats. My stomach dropped. Here it was. The part I knew too well. The script my family had basically tattooed into the inside of my skull. Jonathan's father went first. He talked about Jonathan's work ethic, his brilliance, the way he had always known his son was destined for great things. He mentioned how grateful they were to welcome Sarah into their family. He called her kind, graceful, driven. People nodded like these were obvious, objective facts. Then it was my mother's turn. She walked up to the microphone in her champagne dress, every hair in place. The room leaned in. "For those who do not know me," she began, "I am Linda, the bride's mother." She talked about the day Sarah was born, about how she knew from the moment she held her that her daughter was meant for something special. She told stories about spelling bees and science fairs, debate trophies and college acceptances. Each memory painted Sarah as the star of a film she had been directing her whole life. When she talked about planning the wedding, she described shopping trips and menu tastings, late-night calls, debating flower choices. She spoke about watching her daughter grow into the kind of woman any mother would be proud to call her own. She never said my name, not once, not a casual mention of we, not a my daughters, not a single acknowledgement that Sarah had a sister sitting 20 feet away, listening to a version of our family history where she was an only child. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, my face neutral, while inside something long and fragile finally snapped. Beside me, I felt Evan's hand close over mine under the table. His grip was firm, steady, like he could feel the impact even if he did not know the backstory. Would you have stayed seated in that moment, listening to your own mother erase you in front of a room full of people? Or would you have walked out and let the doors slam behind you? I still wonder what other people would have done. After my mother finished, everyone clapped. She beamed, especially when Sarah hugged her at the head table. From where I sat, it looked like a painting labeled "Perfect Mother, Perfect Daughter." The maid of honor spoke next. She told college stories, inside jokes, more examples of how extraordinary Sarah was. The best man followed with tales of Jonathan's wild youth and how Sarah had tamed him. Speech after speech layered praise on top of praise until it felt like the whole room was built out of it. And through it all, my name never came up. Not as a sibling, not as a memory, not as anything. I had been edited out of the narrative so cleanly that if you were a stranger in that ballroom, you would have assumed Sarah grew up an only child. That this night was the culmination of one girl's journey supported by her perfect parents, her incredible friends, her impressive new husband. I was the ghost at the feast, present, but never acknowledged. By the time dessert menus appeared, my heart felt numb. Not broken exactly, more like someone had finally finished carving away the pieces that did not fit their version of the sculpture. Evan squeezed my hand again. "Hey," he said quietly, "look at me for a second." I turned. His eyes were steady, a little darker than before. "They can pretend you are not part of their story all they want," he said. "It does not change the fact that you exist, that you matter, that someone in this room sees you." It was such a simple thing to say. It almost undid me. I looked around the ballroom, at the flowers, the candles, the carefully arranged perfection, at my mother, laughing with another couple at the head table, utterly satisfied with the performance she had just given. And for the first time that night, a new thought slipped in between the old familiar ones. What if this is not my rock bottom? What if this is the place I push off from? The funny thing is, the cake was beautiful. 3 tiers, smooth, white fondant, flecks of gold leaf catching the candlelight, sugar flowers that probably took someone hours to shape by hand. It came out on a silver cart while people oohed and pulled out their phones like they were greeting a celebrity. If you did not know any better, you would think this dessert was the star of the night. The band shifted into something soft, while Sarah and Jonathan did the whole cake-cutting routine at the front. They posed with the knife, laughing as the photographer barked instructions. They fed each other dainty bites, careful not to smear anything on their faces. Even their messy moment was controlled. Then the servers went to work, slicing and distributing perfect wedges to every table. When a plate landed in front of me, I stared at it for a second. Rich chocolate sponge, raspberry filling, dark ganache, a thin layer of glaze that gave the whole slice a glossy sheen. It should have been perfect. I took one bite, and had to fight the urge to roll my eyes. Too much gelatin in the filling, ganache overworked, the chocolate bulldozed the raspberry instead of letting it sing. It looked like a dream, and ate like an apology. Not your favorite? Evan asked, watching my face. It is fine, I said. He gave me a look. You said fine the way people say it when it is absolutely not fine. I hesitated, then let the truth slip out. They paid a lot of money for something that photographs better than it tastes, I said. The ganache is grainy, the balance is off. Whoever made this knew how to impress a camera, not a palate. Across from us, Patricia dug into her slice, then glanced up. You sound like you know what you are talking about, she said. I flushed a little. I keep forgetting these people can hear me. I am a pastry chef, I admitted. Occupational hazard. I cannot turn it off. Patricia's interest sharpened. Pastry chef, she repeated. Where? A bakery in Seattle, I said. Small place. I run the early shift. We do a lot of laminated dough, seasonal menus, that kind of thing. She set her fork down completely now. Say more, she said. That seasonal menus comment was not casual. I shrugged, feeling strangely exposed. I like desserts that tell the truth, I said. If something looks simple, it should taste complex. If it looks dramatic, it should deliver. This cake. I gestured at the slice. It is like some people I know. All grand entrance, not much follow-through. Evan's mouth twitched, like he was holding back a smile. Patricia laughed outright. Well, remind me never to invite you to something I half commit to, she said. You would ruin me. The conversation at our table shifted, but in a way that pulled me in instead of pushing me out. They started asking questions, not the condescending kind, not the oh that's cute kind, real questions. How early do you get up? What is the hardest thing to make? What dessert are you proudest of? I answered as best I could. Somewhere along the way, the numbness in my chest eased a little. It was like remembering I had an identity that had nothing to do with who my sister was marrying. When the band slid into a slow song, couples started moving toward the dance floor. Sarah and Jonathan took the center again, twirling under the soft lights. My mother watched from the head table, eyes shining. You want to dance? Evan asked. I looked at the dance floor, at all the eyes pointed in that direction. I am not really a dancer, I said. He gave a small, crooked smile. Good, he said. Neither am I. We will lower the bar together. I almost said no. Then I thought about the last hour, the speeches, the way my mother's words had carved me right out of our own story. The chair in the back row behind the pillar. For once, I did not want to sit and watch other people move. Okay, I said. One dance. He led me to the edge of the crowd, not dead center but not hidden either. His hand settled at my waist, the other holding mine. He moved like someone used to navigating crowded rooms, careful, confident, never pushing too far. You are not terrible, I admitted after a minute. Do not sound so surprised, he said. I have been to a lot of company holiday parties. Mild competence is a survival skill. We moved quietly for a while, and in that small pocket of space, I let myself forget my mother's speech, forget the pillar, forget the fact that my sister had built an entire version of her life where I did not fit. It was just me, and a stranger whose hand felt warmer than it should have, and the gentle sway of music that I could not quite name. When the song ended and something faster kicked in, we stepped back to the edge of the floor. Need air? He asked. Desperately, I said. We slipped out a side door onto a balcony overlooking the water. The air was cooler out there, the sound of waves brushing up against the rocks below, blending with the muffled beat from inside. For a minute, we just stood there in silence, leaning against the railing. I am sorry about the speeches, he said finally. You did not give them, I said. No, but I watched your face while they pretended you were not there, he said. That should not have happened. My throat tightened again. That hateful, familiar sting. That is the thing, I said quietly. It did not even feel surprising, just like confirmation. Confirmation of what? That in my family, I am optional. Sarah is the headline. I am the typo they fixed in the final draft. He studied me for a second. That is one interpretation, he said. Here is another. Your family has grown so used to the version of you they like, that they have no idea what to do with the version standing in front of me right now. I huffed out a humorless laugh. And what version is that? Someone who shows up even when she knows it is going to hurt, he said. Someone who can read a room and a dessert and call both of them out on their nonsense. Someone whose mother's opinion hasn't kept her from building a life anyway. I looked out at the dark water so he would not see how much that landed. You sound like you have experience with this, I said. He was quiet for a beat. My father and I are not exactly on speaking terms, he said. He had a very clear idea of who I was supposed to be. I did not follow the script. We have been revising our relationship ever since. What did he want you to be? His echo, he said simply. I chose not to be. What are you now? He gave a small shrug. Depends who you ask, he said. Officially, I am a sustainability consultant. My firm helps companies stop burning the planet down quite so quickly. Unofficially, I am the guy who gets called when businesses realize bad press about their practices is bad for their stock price. I stared at him. You do what? I asked. He smiled a little at my tone. I work with corporations and investors, he said. Help them transition to cleaner energy, better practices. It is all very noble on paper and very messy in boardrooms. And you know Jonathan? I asked. From work? Not directly, he said. But I know the people behind him, the ones whose money made this whole thing possible. It clicked then, slowly at first. Jonathan's medtech startup, I said. All the talk about funding rounds and backing. My mother will not shut up about it. Are you saying? One of my biggest clients is the VC firm that led his last funding round, Evan said. The CEO is obsessed with being seen as forward-thinking, environmentally responsible. If they want more money from him, they have to listen when I talk. I turned to face him fully now, heartbeat picking up in a way that had nothing to do with romance. So you have influence over the people who have influence over my new brother-in-law, I said. Influence, yes, he said. Control, no. But in their world, even the perception of a strained relationship with me could complicate things they care about. My mouth felt dry. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I sat through the same speeches you did, he said. I watched your mother pretend she had one daughter. I saw how your sister's world is built on who she knows and how she looks, and I do not like bullies, even the ones wrapped in designer dresses and good etiquette. His eyes met mine, steady. What if, he said slowly, there was a way to make them see you differently, not as the extra chair in the back row, but as someone they cannot afford to ignore? I swallowed. That sounds a lot like revenge, I said. He shook his head. Not revenge, he said. Consequences. Visibility. You would not be hurting anyone. You would just stop making it so easy for them to treat you like you do not matter. I leaned back against the railing, my mind spinning. Part of me loved the idea instantly. The part that had sat behind that pillar. The part that listened to my mother erase me with a smile. The part that had spent a lifetime shrinking to fit whatever space was left. Another part of me recoiled. I do not want to be the reason something bad happens to Sarah, I said. Or to Jonathan's career. Or to your reputation. You would not be, he said. All I am suggesting is that we stop helping them maintain the illusion that you are disposable. I keep doing my job, you keep doing yours. We let your worth be seen in rooms where they care about it. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Your sister has built her whole life on image, Claire, he said. On the right husband, the right friends, the right connections. What do you think happens when the girl she tried to hide turns out to be standing next to someone her world answers to? The wind picked up, carrying faint laughter from inside. I looked at him, at the man who had walked into my exile seat and refused to let me stay there. Is it wrong? I asked slowly. If part of me wants that? For them to have to see me? He held my gaze. After everything I watched tonight? He said. No. I think it is the most human thing in the world. If it were you, if your family had spent years pretending you did not count, would you take the chance to let them feel, even just once, what it is like to need you? I still do not know what the right answer is. I just know what I chose. I did not give Evan an answer that night. We stood on that balcony until the cold started to seep through my dress, talking around the edges of what he had offered. Visibility, consequences, not revenge, he kept saying, but the word sat there anyway, between us. Like the one guest, no one wanted to introduce. When I finally went back to my room, I hung my dress carefully over the back of the chair and stared at myself in the bathroom mirror. Same face, same tired eyes, same woman who had driven 3 hours to be seated behind a pillar at her own sister's wedding. Only now there was this other thing sitting in my chest. A possibility. What if my life did not have to orbit my family's opinion anymore? What if my work could speak louder than my last name? The next morning, I drove home with my phone on the passenger seat, screen face up. A part of me expected the whole night to dissolve with the hangovers and wilted flowers, wedding magic, temporary and fragile. Instead, halfway back to Seattle, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Evan. Made it back to the land of spreadsheets and bad coffee. Just checking you got out of the land of pillars alive. Despite myself, I smiled. Claire. Barely. Took emotional damage. May need pastry-based therapy. He replied almost immediately. Evan. Good thing I know a pastry professional. Also, I meant what I said last night. About wanting people to see you. About wanting to see you again. Period. No rush on the heavy stuff. But can I take you to dinner next week? For a full minute, I just stared at the message. Was this part of his visibility plan? Or did he actually want to see me? Claire who bakes, not Claire who is useful. In the end, I answered the only way I knew how. Claire. One condition. No wedding cake. Evan. Deal. I know a place where dessert is allegedly life-changing. You can be the judge. We settled on Thursday. All week, between prepping croissants and scaling recipes, my mind kept jumping ahead. Not to my sister, for once, not to my mother's speech, but to Evan at that table, to the way he had looked at me like I was the most interesting thing in the room, not the biggest disappointment. Thursday night. I stood in front of my closet, feeling like I was 16 again, about to go on my first real date. I picked a simple black dress knot, fancy, but clean lines, something I felt like myself in. I actually put on lipstick, which for me counts as a special occasion. The restaurant Evan chose was one of those places where they do not put prices on the menu, just poetic descriptions like local stone fruit, shaved fennel, charred citrus, the kind of place where people talk quietly, like flavor is a sacred secret. He was waiting at the bar when I walked in a navy jacket and an open-collar shirt. Somehow he looked both polished and like he'd just rolled his sleeves up to solve a problem. You clean up well, he said, standing. You say that like you have seen me at my worst, I replied. He smiled. I have seen you in emotional combat at a family wedding. That probably counts. We were halfway through drinks when his work walked in. She was in her 50s, sharp suit, sharper eyes, brown hair pulled back in a low chignon. The host led her to our table like she knew exactly where she was going. Evan stood. Patricia, he said. Thanks for making time. This is Claire. I blinked. It took me a second to connect her to the woman from the wedding, the one who had not known Sarah had a sister. Here, in her own territory, she looked even more in control. Nice to see you again, she said, sliding into her chair. And this time I know better than to underestimate your taste in company. Her tone was warm, but there was an assessing edge under it. People in her position do not waste time. If she was here, it mattered. Is this a date or a business dinner? I asked later, half joking. Evan's answer was annoyingly honest. Both, he said. You are allowed to be more than one thing at a time. They slipped into work talk first. Timelines, deliverables, a big shareholder gala coming up in the fall. I listened quietly, picking up details. Bennett Tech, investors flying in, a presentation about their new green initiative. A lot of pressure to impress. Eventually, Patricia turned to me. So, Claire, she said, last time I saw you, you were taking notes on that wedding cake like it had personally offended you. Heat rushed to my face. Sorry, I said. Occupational hazard. She rested her chin on her hand. Tell me again what you do, exactly. Evan's text said pastry chef, but that can mean a lot of things. I swallowed and forced myself not to minimize it. I run mornings at a bakery in Capitol Hill, I said. I design the pastry menu, manage production, train staff. We do a lot of laminated dough, custards, fruit tarts, seasonal flavors. I like building a menu that tells a story. A story? She echoed. I nodded. If it is summer, I want people to taste summer, I said. Not just a random strawberry slapped on top of a tart. I want lemon that reminds you of being a kid, or berries that taste like you picked them yourself. If it is October, I want spice and warmth. I want the counter to feel like a mood, not just a list of options. Her gaze sharpened, interest replacing polite curiosity. And the wedding cake? She asked. Beautiful, I said honestly. But flavor-wise, it was scared of its own reflection. She laughed. A genuine burst that made heads turn at a nearby table. Our entrees arrived, then wine, then finally dessert menus. Patricia passed hers to me immediately. I trust you more than I trust the copywriter who named these, she said. Pick something. I scanned the options. A dark chocolate torte with chili and sea salt, a citrus pavlova, a deconstructed cheesecake, and a garden berry millefeuille with vanilla bean crème légère. That one, I said, pointing. If they know what they are doing. The millefeuille arrived, looking like something out of a food magazine. Perfect layers of puff pastry, cream piped between, raspberries and blackberries shining on top. I picked up my fork, took one bite, and closed my eyes. Well? Evan asked. I took a second bite to be sure. This chef actually respects butter, I said finally. Pastry is laminated properly, cream is light, berries are the star, not the garnish. It tastes like late July on purpose. Patricia watched me closely. You talk about dessert the way my marketing team wishes they talked about product launches, she said. Plain English, real feeling. I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. Food is the one place I know I'm not a disappointment, I said quietly. Everything else feels negotiable. The table went quiet for a moment. Patricia's expression shifted, less executive, more human. Evan told me a little about your family, she said. Not details, just that they are very good at seeing one thing and missing everything else. Evan shot her a look, but she waved him off. Relax, she said. I am not here to psychoanalyze your date. I am here because we have a problem I think she can solve. My heart kicked. What kind of problem? I asked. The gala I mentioned, she said. Bennett Tech is hosting it at a downtown venue. Big deal. Investors, board members, press. We have the speeches, the slide decks, the numbers. What we do not have is something that makes the night feel memorable, human, less like a shareholder meeting and more like a story about who we are trying to be. She gestured at the dessert between us. I need someone who can build that into the food, she said. Into the final thing people taste before they decide what they think about us. Someone who understands balance, flavor, structure, presentation, and someone who understands what it feels like to be underestimated. My throat went dry. Are you asking me to? I am asking if you would be interested in designing the dessert program for the gala, she said. 5 or 6 different pieces, hundreds of portions. We pay well, and frankly, we need a fresh voice more than we need another corporate caterer phoning in chocolate mousse. I set my fork down carefully. My hands were shaking. I am just one person in a tiny bakery, I said. I do not have a catering company. You have a kitchen, she said. You have skills. You have zero fear of telling the truth about a bad cake. The rest we can work around. We can coordinate with your boss, rent additional equipment if needed. What I cannot manufacture is taste. Evan was quiet, watching me. He did not jump in, did not sell me, did not push. He had brought me to the table literally, but he was letting me choose whether to sit fully. Part of me wanted to say no immediately. It felt too big, too exposed. Another part of me was already designing flavors. A citrus shooter to cut through hours of speeches. A dark chocolate element that felt like a reward, not an obligation. Something bright and sharp and unexpected in the middle. Something that would make people stop mid-conversation and actually taste their own dessert. I looked at Patricia. Can I think about it? I asked. I would need to talk to my boss. See if we can block off the kitchen. I do not want to say yes and then drown. She smiled. If you did not hesitate, I would not trust you with this, she said. Think about it. Evan has my email. We will need an answer within a week. On the drive home that night, the city lights blurred a little at the edges, not from drinking I had been Carol but from adrenaline and something dangerously close to hope. Here's the question that kept me awake. If someone who barely knows your last name offers you the kind of opportunity your own family never believed you deserved, do you say yes because you earned either? Do you say no because you are afraid it looks like you are only there through someone else's connections? If you were me, sitting in that car with the smell of sugar and butter still clinging to your hair, would you take the chance? Or walk away to prove a point no one in your family is even watching? I said yes. Not right away, not in some movie moment with dramatic music, but 3 days later, standing in the bakery walk-in surrounded by crates of berries. My phone was in my hand, Patricia's email open, my boss's words still ringing in my ears. "Are you kidding me?" she had said. "Of course we can make this work. We will pull some overnights. We will beg, borrow, and steal freezer space. You do this, Claire. You put our name on that room." So I did. For the next 6 weeks, my life shrank to 3 things: the bakery, my apartment, and the test kitchen I built out of every spare hour between. I sketched menus on the backs of order sheets. I woke up at 3 a.m. because I had dreamed of a flavor pairing I did not want to forget. We decided on 5 desserts. A lemon thyme tart that tasted like the first honest day of spring. A dark chocolate dome with a hidden raspberry center that burst when you cracked it. A honey roasted fig and mascarpone bite that walked the line between sweet and savory. A tiny pistachio opera cake, all neat layers and quiet power, and a little shot glass of chilled watermelon and lime, sharp enough to cut through any speech-induced boredom. I wanted every single bite to make a point. You thought dessert was an afterthought. You were wrong. Evan came by the bakery during off hours, leaning against the counter with his sleeves rolled up while I pushed sugar and butter into something new. "You know," he said one night as I piped cream into tart shells, "if this whole event crashes and burns, I am going to have to move to another country." "If this whole event crashes and burns," I said, "I will personally build you a sustainable cabin in the middle of nowhere and fill it with croissants." "Deal," he said. What I did not admit out loud was this: I was terrified. Not of the volume or the logistics, but of what it would mean if I pulled this off. Because success has consequences too. The night of the gala, I barely recognized myself. The event was at a glass and steel venue downtown, all sharp angles and city lights. I had spent the afternoon in the catering kitchen, checking and rechecking every tray, every garnish, every bit of glaze. By the time everything was set, my hair smelled like citrus and sugar and stress. I changed in a tiny staff bathroom, shimmying into the emerald green dress Evan had insisted on buying me. "You need something that looks like it belongs in the same room as your desserts," he had said. In the mirror, I looked taller somehow. Not because of the heels, but because, for once, I was walking into a room for what I could do. Not because someone felt obligated to invite me. When I stepped into the main space, the transformation took my breath away. The city shimmered through the floor-to-ceiling windows. Spotlights washed the room in warm light. Sleek banners with Bennett Tech's logo hung from the ceiling. Waiters moved through the crowd with trays of champagne. People in expensive clothes talked in low, confident voices. And then I saw them. My mother's profile first. That familiar tilt of her chin. Sarah's hair next to her. Perfect waves over one shoulder. Jonathan beside them, nodding along as someone spoke. For a moment, I froze. My brain could not reconcile the 2 images. The girl from behind the pillar. The woman about to serve dessert to the people who funded her brother-in-law's career. Evan appeared at my side like he had been watching for exactly this moment. "Breathe," he murmured. "You belong here more than half these people." "Do they know I am here?" I asked. His mouth twitched. "They know I am here," he said, "which means they are curious. And Patricia is about to take care of the rest." The night rolled forward in speeches and presentations, charts about emissions reduction, slides about innovation, executives congratulating themselves with practiced humility. I stayed near the back, watching as servers brought out the first round of desserts, little lemon thyme tarts, glistening under the light. I watched people take their first bites. You can tell a lot about someone from how they react to food: a surprised blink, a pause mid-sentence, a hand reaching automatically for a second piece. From where I stood, I saw all of it. Patricia made her way to the stage near the end of the evening. When she took the microphone, the room quieted. She was good at this. at making a corporate update sound like a personal victory. She talked about the project, about hitting their targets, about how sustainability was now part of their story, not just a line item. Then she smiled in a way that made my stomach flip. "There is one more person I want to thank tonight," she said. "Someone who is not on our payroll, but probably should be. The last thing you taste at an event is often what you remember most. It can undo a whole night or make it unforgettable." She paused. "I think we can all agree dessert tonight fell into the second category." Polite laughter rippled through the room. "The desserts you have been enjoying were all designed and created by one person," she said. "A local pastry chef with more talent in her hands than most of us have in our whole committees. Claire Donovan. Will you join me for a moment?" For half a second, I thought I had misheard her. Then every head in the room started turning, searching for the name she had just said. "My name." Evan nudged me gently. "That is your cue," he said. My legs felt like they were made of someone else's bones as I walked toward the stage. I could feel eyes tracking me, hear the low murmur as people put pieces together. "Is that the dessert chef? She is so young." "Donovan. Any relation to?" I climbed the small set of stairs with my heart in my throat. Under the bright lights, everything looked sharper. Patricia's smile, the rows of faces beyond her, and in the middle of it all, my mother and Sarah. They were both clapping, but the expression on their faces was not simple pride. It was something knotted, surprise, discomfort, calculation, something dangerously close to respect. Patricia turned to me as I reached her. "Claire," she said, into the microphone. "Thank you. You gave us a way to end tonight on something honest and beautiful, instead of just numbers on a slide." She handed me a sleek folder with the Bennett logo on it. "Inside, this is a contract," she said. "We would like to partner with you for all our major events in the coming year. I hope you say yes, but even if you do not, I wanted everyone in this room to know whose work they have been talking about all night." I stared at the folder, then out at the crowd. They were still clapping. My throat tightened, but I forced myself to speak. "Thank you," I said into the mic. "I wanted to make desserts that did not just look good in photos, desserts that tasted like somebody meant them." A few people laughed softly. More nodded. When I stepped off the stage, the noise hit me like a wave. People I had never met put out their hands. "Incredible work. Do you have a card? We have an event in October. We should talk." Evan's hand found mine again, squeezing once. His eyes said everything he did not say out loud in that moment. "I am proud of you." Across the room, my mother still had not moved. Sarah leaned toward her, saying something I could not hear. Jonathan looked like someone had just informed him the building's foundation had shifted a few inches to the left. Here is the part I want you to picture, because this is the moment that still makes me smile on bad days. My mother, who had once introduced me as Claire, she works with food, now stood in a room where half the people wanted to know me, and none of them cared who she was. If your mom had erased you in a wedding speech and then got stuck watching a crowd line up to shake your hand, what would you say to her on the car ride home? Be honest. I am asking for the comments section. I did not go to her first. I let her come to me. It took a while. Every time she took a step, someone else stopped me to ask about flavors or bookings, or if I would consider shipping out of state. When she finally reached me, her smile was tight but present. "That was quite something," she said. "I had no idea you were doing work like this." That was the thing. I had always been doing work like this. She had just never been willing to look in my direction. I met her eyes and, for the first time in a long time, I did not feel like I was tilting my chin up to meet someone else's gaze. "I have been busy," I said. "You know how it is." She glanced at the folder in my hand, at the executive still hovering nearby. "Well," she said, "it seems your career choices have worked out after all." It was not an apology. Not even close. But it was the first crack in the wall she had built around who she thought I was allowed to be. And the best part was this. Whether she ever truly apologized or not, it did not change what had just happened. For one night, in a room that mattered deeply to her new favorite son-in-law, I was the name on everyone's lips. Not because I was somebody's sister, not because I was attached to someone powerful, but because the thing I loved most had finally had the room to speak for itself. If the gala was the night my family was forced to see me, the months after were when they realized they had to keep seeing me. The Bennett contract turned out to be more than a one-off, Once people in that room tasted what I could do, word moved faster than any marketing campaign. Patricia kept her promise. Every time Bennett hosted something that mattered, my name was on the menu. Other companies started calling too. A law firm, a foundation, a hospital network. For the first time in my life, people were scheduling their big nights around my calendar. The bakery changed too. Maria and I restructured the business so I could take on events without burning out. I trained a second-in-command for mornings. We added private dessert design to our website, in a quiet little tab that somehow became the most clicked page. One afternoon, surrounded by order forms and invoices, Maria grinned at me over the espresso machine. "You realize you are not just working with food anymore, right?" she said. "You are the food people brag about knowing." I laughed, but the words wedged somewhere deep. The first family gathering after the gala was Thanksgiving. Same house, same table, same overcooked turkey smell that somehow never changed. What did change was the way my mother said my name. "This is Claire," she told one of Jonathan's colleagues as we loaded our plates. "She is a pastry chef. She just did a big event for Bennett. Everyone has been talking about her work." She still said pastry chef like she had practiced, like the words were new in her mouth. But she did not tack on "for now" or "until she gets a real job." For her, that was practically a revolution. Sarah was different, too. She pulled me into the hallway while people were still filling their plates, her voice low. "You really blindsided us at that gala," she said. "Me?" I asked. "I was invited. I worked. I got paid. That is kind of how jobs work. You know what I mean," she said. "For weeks afterward, all anyone wanted to talk about was your dessert table. Mom has practically turned it into her personality." There it was, that flicker in her eyes. Not hatred, not even jealousy, something more complicated. The realization that the little sister she had been able to ignore for years had suddenly become relevant in her world. Relevant and necessary. Jonathan came up behind her then, resting an easy hand on her shoulder. "Claire," he said, "we were just talking about you. Patricia cannot stop raving. She says your partnership has done more for their human touch than a year's worth of branding workshops." He said it like a joke, but there was a carefulness under his tone. I recognized it from the way people at the gala had spoken to Evan, that mix of respect and strategic friendliness that comes from knowing someone's influence touches your paycheck. I smiled. "I am glad it is working out," I said. "Smart investments deserve good dessert." He laughed, but it hit its mark. He knew what I was implying. I was not just some decorative extra. I was now a part of the ecosystem he lived in, whether he liked it or not. Here is the part no one tells you about getting even with family. Sometimes the real revenge is not a dramatic blow-up. It is watching the people who once dismissed you learn how to act polite, because your existence now affects their image. In the months that followed, invitations started showing up more often. Not the obligatory kind with my name scribbled in the corner, but actual calls. "We are having people over this weekend," Mom would say. "You should come. Bring something if you like. Only if you are not too busy with all your events." She said events the way she used to say exams when talking about Sarah. Sarah texted sometimes, too. "Saw your bakery tagged on Instagram again. Those lemon tarts look insane. Think you could do something like that for a charity brunch I am hosting?" Old me would have heard the subtext, "Use your talent to make my life shinier," and bent over backward to please her. New me heard something else. I had leverage. I started setting boundaries, real ones, spoken out loud instead of silently stewing. "I cannot do next Saturday," I told her once. "I have a contract event on Sunday, and I am not pulling an all-nighter just so your friends can say wow and forget to eat." She frowned. "It is just one platter, Claire. It is my body and my time," I said. "I am happy to help when I can, but when I can does not mean whenever it makes you look good." There was a long beat where I could feel the old dynamic straining to snap back into place. Then she exhaled. "Okay," she said. "Another time." That okay did not come from a sudden burst of sisterly understanding. It came from calculation. She knew better than to push too hard now that my name had receipts in her circle. She had built a life where image mattered more than feeling. Now that image required me to look like the beloved sister, the talented relative, the one she had always believed in. She had made her cage. I just watched her pace in it. Evan and I didn't magically turn into some perfect power couple through all this. We had our own fights about burnout, about how much of my family drama he was allowed to carry, about the line between helping and rescuing. One night, after I snapped at him for asking how a meeting with my mother went, he sat on my tiny couch and said quietly, "I can walk away from this, Claire, from your family, from their mess, but I do not want to walk away from you. You have to tell me where the line is." That was the thing, he always gave me a choice. He opened doors. I decided whether to walk through them. We eventually moved in together. Not because it looked good, not because it made anyone else's life easier, but because my apartment always seemed to have his laptop on the table and his jacket on the chair anyway. We talked about someday about maybe opening a bigger space, one part bakery, one part dessert studio, about maybe a little cottage far away from pillars and place cards, just us and a stupid amount of butter. As for my mother and Sarah, we never had some tearful, dramatic reckoning. No big group therapy session where everyone apologized and hugged. What we had instead was a slow shift. At family events, my mother started introducing us the same way. "These are my daughters," she would say. "Sarah is in medtech. Claire runs a bakery and does these amazing events." The first time she said daughters out loud like that, I caught the slight hitch before amazing. Old habits do not die, they get edited. Sarah, meanwhile, learned the art of performance. Around Jonathan's colleagues or anyone from Bennett, she became the doting sister, hand on my arm, loud praise about my genius with flavors. I know it was an act, she knows I know, but the act had a cost for her. The more she played the role of supportive sibling for her audience, the harder it became for her to slip fully back into the old dismissive version when the doors closed. Pretending long enough started to crack something in the story she told herself about who we were. That, more than anything, was the quiet win. Do I think they love me now more than they did before? I do not know. Some days, it feels like they are just better at hiding their disappointment behind compliments. Other days, when my mother tastes something I have made and closes her eyes for half a second longer than she meant to, I think maybe there is a small, growing respect. Here is the hook I wish someone had given me at the beginning of all this. Sometimes the only way to stop begging your family to see your worth is to build a life so solid they have to trip over it on their way to ignore you. The wedding behind the pillar did not change who I was, it just finally showed me, in the most brutal way possible, who they were and forced me to decide what I was going to do about it. I did not burn anything down. I did not cut everyone off forever. I did something harder. I stayed. I worked. I grew. I let my success sit in the same room as their old story, until one of them had to move. It was not revenge in the movie sense, no screaming at the reception, no public takedown. Just me, quietly becoming someone they could not prune out of the family tree without losing a few branches of their own. And if you have ever felt like the one behind the pillar, the forgotten kid, the quiet sibling, the she just works with food of your family, maybe this is the part that matters most. You do not have to destroy them to prove they were wrong about you. You just have to stop agreeing. If you are still listening to this thinking, that could have been my family holiday, hit subscribe and stick around. There are a lot more stories where the forgotten one stops playing background music, and I do not think you should have to watch those alone.